Thanks very much for joining us, Nick.
Good afternoon, Matt.
Mate, if we can just start on the point, we hear a lot of talk about red tape, but why is it such an important issue for CCIQ?
When we travel throughout Queensland and we meet with Queensland businesses, the number one issue that they identify that is impeding their ability to grow is red tape. Essentially, red tape is acting as a barrier for business to be able to grow, invest and employ. And we really do think that it is the number one constraint of business at this point in time. And certainly it is a significant challenge, but there's a bit of a conundrum when it comes to red tape, in that each and every individual piece of regulation at some point in time has been identified as being in the public interest. But it's only when you sum all of that red tape together does it create a regime that essentially stifles business from growing. And that's why we believe that CCIQ has a core role in identifying areas that the state government in particular can action to have reduce and make more efficient.
Right, and we hear a lot about red tape itself, but rarely do you hear an actual dollar value. Have we got any estimates on the impact of red tape on business in Queensland?
Indeed we do, and this is a bit of a funny one. This one, we asked members, has Queensland become a nanny state? And indeed, 93% of all of our members think that yes, Queensland has become a nanny state. If you put a dollar value on it, it's about $7.5 billion a year. So the cost to the business community of filling out their regulatory requirements, their state-based regulatory requirements, is about $7.5 billion. Now that's been growing by about 8% each year over the last 3 or so years. 72% of all Queensland businesses believe that red tape has a moderate to major impact on their business. 2/3 of businesses believe that the cost in terms of regulatory compliance has increased over recent years, and so it really is amounting to a significant cost on the Queensland business community that we believe ultimately we can be more efficient and effective in the way that we deliver regulatory expectation upon the business community.
Right, and of that $7.5 billion, have we got some hotspots, some areas that are particularly straining business in terms of red tape?
Yeah, look, when we talk to businesses, they identify obviously tax obligations. The Australian Taxation Office is the number one area that business has a beef with. In terms of, they also have an issue with the Fair Work Act. The Fair Work Act imposes a high level of regulatory obligation on business, in particular employment law. But in respect to the state, Workplace Health and Safety Queensland and WorkCover, they're the two hotspots in terms of state regulatory compliance. The regular suspects, and indeed both those organisations, Workplace Health and Safety Queensland and WorkCover, are very conscious that their expectation on business is onerous. They're endeavouring to improve and lift their game, and that's why CCIQ is working together with those two organisations to try and identify some examples where they can do better. In terms of, they're the hotspots, but some of the particular issues is obviously completing paperwork and reporting requirements, and understanding the obligations and regulatory requirements. And the Chamber has to be careful here, because through well-intentioned change, you can actually create even more impost on business, because every time you remove or you adapt or seek to improve a piece of regulation, it's actually regulatory churn, and what that really means is a business has a new requirement to understand their new obligations. So we need to balance the issue of regulatory churn against trying to actually make an improvement.
Right, and you've been lobbying very hard. What are the state government doing about it, and how are they addressing this issue?
If you were to score the previous state government on their commitment to addressing red tape, you would probably score them very highly. But the reality is, and from an actuality point of view, they failed to make any significant inroads into reducing the red tape burden in Queensland. Where this state government differs from the previous state government and pretty much all other state governments in Australia, it's put in place a process as to how it will seek to reduce red tape in Queensland by 20%. And it's process driven in that they've appointed a political champion, being the Premier. The Premier has then charged all his ministers and their departments with having a responsibility to drive down their portfolio's regulatory burden. And so you've got a whole of government approach to driving it down. But again, what differentiates this state government from others is that they're putting in place a baseline measure. How much red tape actually exists in Queensland? They've set themselves a target of 20% reduction, and they're going to make transparent how they go about achieving that target and what their progress is. So there will be real transparency, but most importantly, accountability, and there really will be a cadence, I guess, of progress in trying to drive down the regulatory burden in Queensland. So we're indeed, we afforded equal opportunity to both the political parties prior to the state election in 2012, but we worked extensively with the LNP in identifying that it really has to be process driven. Otherwise you come up with the scattergun approach of randomly identifying an example that cumulatively doesn't get us to where we ultimately need to be.
Right, and from a CCIQ perspective then, how do you collate your information? How do you take that to the state government or the relative body and get it addressed?
Okay, so the Chamber's been doing a range of activities. So initially we worked with the LNP to put in place the process, and that's a top-down approach, but ultimately we have to come up with examples to feed into the process of delivering that 20% reduction. Now we've been able to do that largely through conducting a number of case studies with our members to provide first-hand evidence and actual examples of red tape that can be more efficient and effective. And we are taking those examples and we're providing them back to the state government. Now, as I indicated, Workplace Health and Safety Queensland, it's a hotspot. This month we really would encourage CCIQ members to come to us with examples in the portfolio of workplace health and safety, so we can in turn take them back to the department and take them back to the business advisory forum that the Premier has set up to say, hey, look, we think there's a problem here. We think that the department can do it better in this area, and here's how we think you can do it.
Wonderful. Thanks for your time this afternoon, Nick.
You're very welcome.